Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. It's Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. It seems like things are getting heated. Things are getting significantly more interesting, shall we say, in the past couple of weeks. Really, since mid-September is when I think I started to notice it. There have been quite a few stories, quite a few events this month that have led me to believe that we may be approaching perhaps a black swan event, a significant movement in financial markets, something significant possibly for the price of silver. And I wanted to talk to you about that and get some feedback, see what you guys think about what's going on in the world, and also just share some of my thoughts and why I think things are getting a little more heated and a little more crazy right now in the world. So first of all, the Federal Reserve has been injecting money into the repo markets or the repurchase markets. I have a story here from thestreet.com. The headline reads, Fed extends repos until November 4th. Dealers brace for $193 billion in treasury sales. And I'm going to read some of this article. The Federal Reserve will extend its cash injections into overnight lending markets for at least another month, after pumping in more than $330 billion since mid-September, as banks face a wave of Treasury bond sales this week amid a near-record budget deficit and ongoing concern over the strength of the world's biggest economy. The New York Fed said Friday it will extend its overnight repo operations until at least November 4th, after earlier signaling they could end on October 10th. As part of its broader effort to ease funding conditions in overnight lending markets and bring costs closer to its new Fed funds target rate of 1.75 to 2%. A series of 8 term repos or lending operations that inject cash for longer periods of time will also be conducted between now and November 4th. Okay, and so the article goes on to describe how the Federal Reserve has been injecting cash for almost a month now into financial markets and is planning on doing that until November 4th. And it finishes with a quote from Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, who said that the impact of tax payments and bond purchases on the system's primary dealers was stronger than we expected and surprised market participants a lot too. And it goes on to say, he also hinted at a move towards adding to the Fed's $3.8 trillion balance sheet with more bond purchases in order to smooth bank lending conditions as the Fed lowered the rate it will pay on overnight reserves by 0.3% to 1.8% in an effort to entice more bank-to-bank lending. If I remember correctly, the Federal Reserve was recently talking about shrinking its balance sheet, and that all seems to have gone out the window this year as they've been cutting interest rates and are now discussing expanding their balance sheet with more bond purchases. Now, we hear a lot in the news, a lot of talking points from pundits and politicians and talking heads about how the U.S. economy is strong and it's never been stronger and this is a great economic recovery. But I want to ask, in what kind of a healthy economy would the central bank need to be injecting billions and billions of dollars and cutting rates constantly and expanding its balance sheet? I think that these activities of the Fed are a sign that the economy is ailing, it's not healthy, we're heading towards a recession. In order for them to stave off what's coming, they're going to have to be doing a lot more of this type of thing. And this is basically QE5, it's just they haven't described it as such yet, but it's injections of cash from the Federal Reserve into the markets. And they're going to have to do a lot more of this if they're going to stave off a serious economic recession or depression, which I think we're headed for. Another sign of economic weakness around the world, I don't know if anybody's seen this story about PMC Bank over in India, but I'll read you a headline from Reuters. PMC Bank used more than 21,000 fictitious accounts to hide loans it made, according to a police complaint lodged by Indian officials, in the latest banking fraud case to spook the country's depositors and investors. Long story short, the PMC Bank, what they did was they had a lot of non-performing loans from a development company for about $616 million And rather than writing off those assets or admitting that they were non-performing, they created 21,000 fictitious accounts to cover this up over the past 10 years. And the result of that is that about 900,000 depositors are now at risk of losing all of their money kept in the bank. This is not a small bank in India. This is a gigantic bank. It's one of their top 5 banks. And they have basically, through fraud, lost their depositors' money through malinvestment and investing in risky assets, losing the money and then covering it up through fraud and cooking their books. So this is just another sign of what's going on globally. So don't think that this is the last bank you are going to see involved in this kind of a bank failure. We may see significantly more disruptions in the global financial system in the near future, including more bank failures. In addition to the problems going on in the global financial system, there are also some pretty serious political issues. The Fed started its repo operations in mid-September, but another thing that happened in mid-September was the Houthi rebels in Yemen bombing the Saudi Arabian Aramco plant, which temporarily spiked the price of oil by, I think, 11% in one trading day on the Monday when markets opened after that weekend bombing occurred. That was the Houthi rebels in Yemen using a drone and a bomb to attack a Saudi Arabian oil refinery. There were accusations that Iran was behind this, and it wasn't just the Houthi rebels, that the Houthis were not sophisticated enough to pull off an attack like this. And whether that's just propaganda to demonize the Iranians or not, whether it has no basis in reality and this was done by just the Houthis, I think is sort of immaterial. It just shows that there is a level of tension in the Middle East that is escalating. Recently, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said during a 60 Minutes interview, quote, "If the world does not take a strong and firm action to deter Iran, we will see further escalations that will threaten world interests. Oil supplies will be disrupted, and oil prices will jump to unimaginably high numbers that we haven't seen in our lifetimes," unquote. So if something like that were to happen, if something more serious than the bombing of a oil refinery were to occur between Saudi Arabia and Iran, say a full-out hot war in the Middle East, certainly the price of oil would skyrocket, and that would have devastating effects for the global economy. That would usher in perhaps the steepest depression we've seen in any of our lifetimes, not to mention the effect that that would have on the price of precious metals, which of course all of us as silver stackers find to be a topic of interest. Mining silver and gold is a very energy-intensive process. If the cost of oil were to go up dramatically, I think it would stand to reason that metals would go up not only as a safe haven, but also just due to the increased cost of production with high energy costs. In addition to the mounting tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the U.S. pulled out of Syria this week, and the Turkish military promptly replaced them. They rolled their troops in, probably to wipe out the Kurdish presence there in Syria. And the Kurds were the U.S. allies in fighting ISIS, but the YPG, the Kurdish organization operating in Syria, is technically listed as a terrorist organization. So the Turks have been fighting the Kurds for years, as the Kurds in Turkey are trying to fight for independence. I don't know what effect having the Turkish military move into Syria will have, but it changes the status quo and is therefore potentially destabilizing. And aside from what's going on in the Middle East, which is crazy enough, the protests in Hong Kong against the People's Republic of China have been mounting and becoming more violent. A protester was shot last week. Interestingly, a lot of Western companies have been getting involved in this. There was an owner of an NBA team sent out a tweet in support of Hong Kong protesters, and China promptly banned his NBA team from operating there, which is, of course, a huge source of revenue for the NBA. So he quickly deleted the tweet and issued an apology. There was a pro gamer who was streaming Hearthstone, one of Blizzard's video games, issued a message of support for the Hong Kong protesters. Blizzard promptly banned him from their tournament and took away his prize money. There's an episode of South Park that just came out called Banned in China, which was actually just banned in China. It's interesting to see some of these companies deciding that the revenues they can gain in the Chinese market are more important to them than supporting democracy and free speech. That's something to take note of, perhaps a trend we will continue to see more of. China is cracking down on these protesters. China is descending more into an Orwellian police state with its social credit score system and facial recognition technology. That is going to be an interesting trend to follow. It's going to be interesting to see how these protests in Hong Kong resolve and how this all ends up working out ultimately. But anyway, these are just a few of the things I've been paying attention to this October. What do you guys think of these issues and any other crazy issues in the news, crazy things going on in the world? Seems like things are heating up and just getting more unstable, and the financial markets are getting wilder. The possibilities for a black swan event occurring, a market crash or a spike in the price of petroleum or silver or commodities, any of these outlier events, seems like the probability of one of them occurring is increasing. What do you think? Let me know. What do you think could be the next big black swan event, and how do you think it could affect the price of silver? Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter at StackSmarter.